In this video I'm going to show you a very nice game played by world's number one Magnus Carlsen, playing with the white pieces against the Frenchman with three names, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, also known as MVL. It's a very short game. I'm not going to say anything about it yet, but you will enjoy it. A lot of things are happening in this short time. A lot of good moves. But before I'm going to show you what actually happened, you have to make one good move yourself. And that's just click on the button to subscribe to this channel. Thanks for doing that. And then we will see what Magnus is doing with the white pieces. As he begins the game with the move Knight f3, d5, c4, e6, g3, fianchettoing the bishop. Very standard opening. Knight f6, bishop g2, bishop e7. Both sides are castling. This is the first important moment in the game. A lot of people, they would just play here the move d4. When we are transposing to a 1d4 opening again, it's the main line of the Catalan. A lot of opening theory there. Nowadays it's also quite popular to not to occupy the center with your d-pawn yet, but opt for a double fianchetto with the move b3. So that at some point you do get two bishops controlling the center on both diagonals. That's white's strategy, and let's see how that works out in this game. Black now decides to make use of this particular move order and advances its pawn to d4. So that if you put the bishop on b2, then the pawn on d4 will be under attack, but black has different ideas of supporting that pawn on d4, and the bishop will actually not be that well placed. So Magnus goes for the more precise e3. He wants to challenge the pawn on d4, get rid of that pawn, so that later the bishop can function on an open diagonal. Here black needs to decide how he's going to protect the pawn. You don't really want to take on e3, because in that case white recaptures with the f-pawn, so that the f-file will be opened for the rook. White can also occupy the center with its own pawns later. So black needs to protect the pawn. The main move here is to play c5, following it up with the move knight c6 with very modern opening line. Lot of theory there as well, but knight c6 is played here, has been seen in other games as well, but I feel it's not the most precise way of playing, because after pawn takes pawn, black does recapture, the bishop comes to b2 and the knight is under an attack. Attacked by both the bishop and the knight. So here, black played this move, bishop c5. An interesting moment, because black has now a nice square for a minor piece on d4. If you can maintain control over that square, maybe black is even better. But you have to be very precise here as white. And the main move actually is to play knight e5. This may look strange, but you do open up the diagonal for your bishop. And there are plans of bringing the knight to d3 to attack the bishop. Maybe later on you play knight c3, knight e2, trying to get rid of black's pieces which are controlling the d4 square. May still seem a bit fake if I'm talking about this, but after the move knight c3 played by Magnus, I think black has a big opportunity here to trade off one set of knights. I think that's a good way of playing. And then next, you can put your bishop on d4. The bishop is very stable on this square, putting a bit of pressure on this diagonal. You have ideas to play c6 so that the bishop on f3 is no longer pressurizing that pawn on b7. And after that, you play the move e5 and the bishop from c8 can be brought into play. I think black is absolutely fine here. But this was not played in the game, and instead black played here the move rook e8. His plan now, MVL, really wants to play the move e5. So that's why the rook is on e8 to support the advance of the pawn. But now white gets a second chance to play the move knight e5. So both sides didn't play the opening very precisely. Now the knight comes to e5, and that's very important because the bishop is very active. And there are problems for black getting that light squared bishop into the game. There followed the move bishop d6. Black wants to get rid of that knight on e5, but things are not that simple because Magnus played here this move, f4. Looks a very aggressive move, but the pawn is nicely supporting the knight. And since white maintains control over the e5 square, there are still these coordination problems with that bishop on c8, but also the rook on a8. Black's major pieces are not really able to work that well together. So here white is seizing the initiative. Look what happened here. Bishop c5 played. The bishop goes back to the square where it already was. So black is wasting time. And, well, of course, there are ideas now that if black were allowed to play one more move, the knight can go away with a discovered check, hitting the king. So the king just goes into the corner. That's a good move. Queen e7. And black is trying to find alternative plans to consolidate its position with the queen on e7. Probably one of the ideas is to play at some point a move bishop a3, trying to trade off pieces that will enlighten the pressure on black's position. But may you guess here what Magnus played? That's not an easy move at all. Very surprising idea, to be honest, and very instructive, because here Magnus says that, okay, I've developed all my pieces. I'm going for the attack with the move g4. That's something I would not have expected here, but his plan is very simple. He wants to bring up its g-pawn to g5 to attack that knight, remove the main defender of black's king side. Black played rook d8. So the rook now also supports the knight on d4, but you see that black is really trying to find a convenient setup for its pieces, but it's clear that he has failed. He spent too much time shuffling around with the bishop first. Now the queen is on e7. The rook goes from e8 to d8. Well, that's not the way you would like to start your game. And that's why Magnus senses this is the moment to take advantage of these inaccurate decisions by black. g5 played. Knight is under attack. The knight goes to d7. So knights can be exchanged at some point. But white plays here the move knight e4. Putting pressure on that bishop. The bishop has this defensive task of keeping the knight protected. If the bishop goes to a bad square, then the knight can just be taken. Let's have a look what may have happened here. If black captures on e5, then it's f takes e5, and the rook just becomes very active. There are a lot of attacking ideas. Maybe at some point the knight can even come to f6. The queen can come in. It's not very fun, I can tell you. So instead of taking on e5, knight f8 was played. MVL understands that he needs to take care of its king side, but you cannot keep just such a knight alive on e5. That piece is just really strong. And now the queen comes into play. Queen h5. That's another very good move. Queen is very nicely placed here. And it cannot be chased away. That's important to understand. If you do play g6 to attack the queen, then you're really weakening your dark squares in front of your king. You can just move your queen away to h3, for instance. But just one thing, don't play here a move like knight f6. That's a huge blunder. It looks like you're just winning on the spot, but there's queen takes f6. Black sacrifices the queen, because if you do take back, the queen on h5 can be taken. Black is a piece up. But as I said, queen h3, and then very soon a knight will land on f6, and well, this is not going to end well for black. So let's see. After queen h5, MVL played here the move knight g6. Anyway, the knight comes to the king side. At some point, knights can be exchanged as well. But of course, you don't want to take on g6. After h takes g6, the queen is under an attack, needs to move again. And well, black has at least some time to think about how to consolidate its position. But a much better move played by Magnus here is the move knight g4. He's keeping the pieces on the board. And look at these two knights. They have some huge plans. And it's going to be revealed on the next move. First, MVL played the move bishop a3. He wants to get rid of that monster of a bishop. If this bishop stays on this diagonal, at some point it will strike against black's kingside formation. But this time the bishop can just pause here for a second. The other pieces will do the job. Knight gf6 with check. Very nice move as the knight attacks the king. And also the pawn on h7. So white is about to take that pawn with the queen. But let's see. G takes f6 is the critical move, of course. And you do have options here. You can take with a knight or with a pawn. If you do take with a knight, the idea is that you can take next with the queen on h7. But it also does give black the additional option of sacrificing the queen. And after g takes f6, bishop takes b2, the position is still good for white. Don't get me wrong, but it's the position with the material imbalance. White is having a queen versus 3 minor pieces, which is materially speaking almost equal. We don't have to go into depth here. When you have a good position, you would rather not to go for this material imbalance, but rather try to play for mating attack straight away. G takes f6 is a much more practical continuation. You're attacking the queen is in trouble because the queen got to keep the bishop protected. Queen b4 was played. Queen f8 is another move, but it doesn't really solve the problems. For instance, in that case, there is knight g5, threatening checkmate in 1. And after h6, then the pawn is still defended by the queen, but deflection motive. Bishop takes a3, as the queen is under attack, cannot keep the pawn defended. After queen takes a3, queen takes h6, it's just going to be checkmate very soon. Anyway, queen b4 was played. Now similar things can just happen. Knight g5 was played. Now black doesn't even have the possibility to play h6. White is threatening to take on h7 with mate to come. If you do take the bishop, queen takes h7, king f8, queen takes f7, boom. Very nice move, and protecting the pawn on h7 with a knight is also not working out well because of queen takes f7. Then the other pawn can be taken, king has to go into the corner, and then it's checkmate on g7. MVL tried the move king f8, but the king cannot really escape. That's a pity for him. There's queen takes h7. Now it's queen takes f7 with a mating threat, so the rook protects the pawn, but the rook also has already another defensive task to protect the knight, and therefore the move bishop takes d4 is a very simple and good move. It's just materially speaking, it's even if you just count the pieces, but if we do count the pawns, we see that white is already 2 pawns up. But more importantly, the mating attack is still in progress. And look at black's pieces. This is absolutely hopeless. And against a top player, world-class player like Magnus Carlsen, you should show respect and not continue the game. That's what MVL did. That's probably the only good move he played in this game. Just an awful game for a very strong grandmaster. I mean, you can lose to Magnus, but not in just 23 moves. It was very poor play in the opening by MVL, but the way Magnus punished his opponent's mistakes is even more impressive. So that's why I wanted to show you this game. Hope you like it. Let me know in the comments what you think of it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and I'll be back soon with more exciting games from this tournament.